Before you watch Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, I'm going to recap the events of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and talk about characters and potential things we might expect out of this movie. So if you enjoyed this video today, feel free to like and subscribe for future Marvel content. So, recapping the events of Into the Spider-Verse, so we start off with getting acquainted with the Peter Parker of the universe we're dealing with, which is Earth 1610. So after this Peter's introduction, he says he is the one and only Spider-Man, but then we get a cut to Miles Morales, who is the actual main character of the story. So Miles is the son of his mother, Riel Morales, and his father, Jefferson Davis, who is a police officer in the New York Police Department, or how they refer to it in this movie as the PDNY instead of the NYPD. So Miles is starting a new prep school, which he does not want to attend, and one night he visits his uncle Aaron Davis, who takes him into an abandoned portion of the subway to do some graffiti, and while they're there, Miles gets bitten by a radioactive spider, but he doesn't think anything of it initially, and he just ends up leaving with his uncle. So the next day, Miles notices his body going through changes, specifically his hands and his feet won't stop sticking to stuff. So he reads an Origin Spider-Man comic and realizes that he thinks he might also have spider powers now, which leads him to go back to see the spider in the subway, and the spider is like glitching out when he touches it. So Miles hears some sounds coming from deeper in the subway, and when he goes to investigate, he finds this universe's Peter Parker's Spider-Man fighting the Green Goblin, who seems to be working for Wilson Fisk, who has built a collider to access parallel universes to bring back his wife and son, who were killed by a truck running away from Fisk after seeing what he was doing to Spider-Man, therefore resulting in him blaming Spider-Man for their deaths. Miles gets mildly caught up in the crossfire, and Peter tells Miles he can tell that he's like him, meaning that he knows he has spider powers, and that he would teach him the ropes, but for now he basically had to stay safe and out of the way, and so Fisk tries to start the collider, but the Green Goblin shoves Peter into it, which causes it to explode, and it ends up killing the Green Goblin, and it severely injures Spider-Man. So Peter gives a flash drive to Miles that is meant to stop the collider from being used again, and he tells Miles to go disable it, and when Miles goes to try to do that, Fisk goes to Peter Parker and finishes him off, killing this Peter Parker from Earth 1610. So Miles accidentally makes a noise after this happens and tries to escape, while being chased by the Prowler, who was sent after him by Fisk, and eventually Miles manages to get away and make it back to his parents' apartment. So New York City mourns the death of Spider-Man, and Miles tries his best to become the new Spider-Man, trying to hone his abilities by jumping off a rooftop, which he damages the flash drive that was given to him by Peter in the process. He visits Peter Parker's grave and is confronted by Peter B. Parker, the Spider-Man from Earth 616, which I know can be kind of confusing because the main universe in the comics is Earth 616, and the MCU is now calling itself Earth 616 and so on. So for now, the best possible thing to do is to kind of view the cinematic multiverse and the comic multiverse as completely separate, as well as assume that either this Peter from Earth 616 is wrong, or being from Earth 616 is wrong, or the MCU being Earth 616 is wrong. Either way, one of them has to be wrong. But because I know even in the Sony, I think even in Across the Spider-Verse, the MCU is referenced as Earth 1999-99, which that's a whole other thing. It was once referenced as Earth 1999-99 in like a MCU related book way back, like probably almost a decade ago or something, I think. I forget when. And so people have just assumed that that was the fact, that MCU was Universe 1999-99. Anyway, Miles accidentally knocks this Peter out with his electric abilities and then is confronted by some police and tries to escape with Peter. So they manage to get away, and Miles tries to interrogate this Peter, and they surmise that this Peter is from an alternate universe. So Peter is about to leave Miles and figure out a way back home, but then he caves in and says that he'll teach Miles how to be Spider-Man while he figures out a way home. The first place they go to infiltrate as to find a way to stop the collider is Fisk's research facility that looks like it's in upstate New York, where they attempt to steal a computer from a scientist there. So Miles finds out he can turn invisible, and right before they get caught trying to steal the computer, Peter tries to distract the scientist while Miles gets the computer out of there. So while this is going on, it's revealed that this scientist is Olivia Octavius, this universe's version of Doc Ock, and she starts to fight the two of them. So they're escaping the facility through the woods, and they suddenly receive help from Spider-Gwen, who is the Spider-Woman from Earth 6-5, and who entered this universe about a week, I believe, before the events of the Collider happening, and had met Miles previously at their prep school. So they managed to escape Doc Ock and go to visit this universe's Aunt May, who brings them into a base of operations, kind of, for this universe's Peter. And inside, they find 3 more Spider people. So we have Spider-Man Noir from Earth 90214, Penny Parker from Earth 14512, and Spider-Ham from Earth 8311. So based on info previously from Doc Ock, they all realize that the glitches their bodies are encountering is basically their bodies deteriorating outside of their own universes, and that they'll die if they don't get back. So Miles offers to be the one to stop the Collider and send them home, but none of them think that he's ready to do that. So Miles leaves upset and goes to see his uncle, but he realizes his uncle is the Prowler when he returns to the apartment in the Prowler outfit, and Miles tries to run away while Aaron doesn't know it's Miles yet because he didn't see him without his mask on. He just thought he was the intruder, and he began to chase after Miles. So Miles manages to make it back to Aunt May's, where he tells them that his uncle is the Prowler, and they are ambushed then by Doc Ock, Tombstone, Scorpion, and the Prowler. So they are all fighting over the USB to stop the Collider, and Aaron has Miles basically in a choke, and Miles reveals to Aaron that it's him, which gets Aaron to stop, but then once he does, he's shot in the back by Wilson Fisk. So Miles takes Aaron to an alley to try to escape, and Aaron basically dies in that alley, and Miles' dad finds them there, and Miles ends up running away. So Miles goes back to his dorm room at school, and the other Spider people show up, and Peter tells Miles that Peter plans on sacrificing himself to send everybody home. So later on, Miles' dad goes to his dorm room to apologize for his mistakes, and it ends up giving Miles the inspiration to try to control his powers and create his own Spider-Man suit with the help of Aunt May. So Miles shows up at the Collider to help the other Spider people who are in a brawl with the previous villains, and everybody manages to get back to their universe, and the final face-off begins between Miles and Wilson Fisk. So Fisk overpowers Miles at first, but Miles uses his electricity to send Fisk into the button that they needed to press to stop the Collider and save the city. So Fisk is arrested, and Miles has officially become Spider-Man in his universe, and the movie ends with a portal opening up above Miles and Gwen's voice calling to him, which looks like it could pick right up in Across the Spider-Verse from that moment. So the movie has one post-credit scene where Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099, travels to the universe of the 1967 Spider-Man animated series, and they do the Spider-Man pointing at each other meme. So now we'll move on to Across the Spider-Verse itself. So there's going to be way more Spider people in this movie, so it would be impossible to cover them all. So I'll talk about the ones that seem like they'll be main characters based off of the official social media accounts introducing them. So we're already familiar with Miles Morales, Spider-Gwen, and Peter B. Parker's Spider-Man from Earth 616 into the Spider-Verse. So then the next main Spider-Man being introduced is Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, who from the comics is from Earth 928. So in the comics, Miguel got his spider powers from performing a genetic procedure on himself which would bond his genes with spider DNA. He did this in an attempt to get rid of a hallucinogenic drug that he had been laced with by Tyler Stone, whom he worked for at the company Alchemax. So Miguel has the ability to shoot out webbings from the back of his wrists, and he also has talons and fangs like a vampire. So the next Spider-Person is Jessica Drew, who is known as Spider-Woman. So in the comics, the main Jessica Drew comes from Earth 616. When she was young, her family moved near Wundagore Mountain, which you might be familiar with from Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, where her family lived on top of uranium deposits, which her father, Jonathan Drew, used to fund his genetic experiments as a scientist. So Jessica became sick from the uranium, and her father injected her with a serum made from several species of spiders and put her in a stasis pod given to him by the High Evolutionary, which was from Guardians of the Galaxy, so you're now familiar with him if you saw that, in an attempt to speed up her recovery process. So it still worked very slowly, and decades ended up passing, although Jessica's aging was also slowed within the pod, and Jessica eventually emerged from the pod as an adult with her special spider abilities. So she can also produce electric blasts, similar to how Miles can. So next up, and I apologize if I just completely butcher this pronunciation. But the next up is Pavitr Babarkar, aka Spider-Man India, who in the comics comes from Earth 50101. So he got his powers from an ancient yogi who gave them to him in order to protect the world from evil. So next we have Hobart Brown, aka Spider-Punk, who in the comics comes from Earth 138. He has more of a rock star look with a guitar and a mohawk, and he got his powers from being bitten by a radioactive spider as well. So we then have Margot Kess, aka Spider-Bite, who in the comics comes from Earth 22191, where most people spend their time in a virtual reality space, and Margot became a vigilante in this cyberspace to stop cybercrime. And then finally, we have Ben Reilly, aka the Scarlet Spider, who in the comics is from Earth 616, and he is a clone of Peter Parker. So he was created by the villain known as the Jackal. And along with these spider people that I've talked about so far, we can also see in posters and other trailers that Insomniac's Spider-Man from the PlayStation games will make a cameo, along with the spectacular Spider-Man from the animated series from 2008. Other than the various spider people in this movie, the main villain appears to be Spot, who in the comics was a scientist who worked for Kingpin and was trying to find a way to mimic the powers of Cloak, and ended up succeeding and stepped into a black portal where he was in another black dimension with a bunch of these black portals. So when he left the dimension, the portals were a part of his skin, and he realized that they were portals in space, and he could manipulate them and use them to defeat anybody. So I haven't really been able to determine exactly how Spot is going to be a threat to the spider people of all these universes, but I believe another plot point involves Miles' dad, Jefferson Davis, because in one of the trailers, Miguel O'Hara tells Miles he needs to choose between saving one person and saving every universe, to which Miles responds with the fact that he can do both. So I think a potential plot point could be Miles needing to save his dad from dying, and maybe it's an event that is meant to happen to Miles, but he is trying to prevent it, and the other spider people are trying to let it happen, or otherwise it might lead to some catastrophic consequences of some kind. But that's just me taking a guess, so who knows. But comment down below if you are excited for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and if you enjoyed this video today, feel free to like and subscribe for future Marvel content, and I appreciate you for watching the video.